Japan hopes the international community will encourage and support Sri Lanka's efforts. For the above reasons, Japan will abstain from voting on this draft resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. Pakistan has always advocated dialogue and engagement as preferred means to advance respect for and to resolve concerns around human rights. Consent of and cooperation with the country concerned are essential ingredients in support of national efforts to promote compliance with human rights obligations. We appreciate Sri Lanka's constructive engagement throughout the informal consultation on the draft resolution before the Council. The Sri Lankan delegation made proposals to align the draft text with its national action plans on reconciliation and accountability, including through empowerment of Commission of Inquiry as well as offices on missing persons and reparations. We regret rejection of these proposals. Ignoring these suggestions were a missed opportunity to secure national ownership of the draft resolution in line with aspirations of the Sri Lankan people. Madam President, during the course of informal consultations, Sri Lanka and a number of other delegations had explained that operative paras 5 and 6 of the draft text lacked balance, proportionality, and inconsistency. For example, preambular paras 4 and 11 of the text reaffirm the sovereignty of Sri Lanka and welcome its continued engagement with the UN and its human rights mechanisms. However, these provisions are at complete variance with the legally untenable external accountability mechanism. We note that such provisions are neither grounded in nor are drawn from the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, the founding UNGA Resolution 60/251 and the IB package. Similarly, Operative Para 7 seeks to expand the scope and the context of 12 years long Sri Lanka's engagement with the Council. We note that the original process that was rooted in promoting reconciliation and accountability in the context of civil war in 2009 is now incompatible with the approach and contents of the draft resolution before the Council. Madam President, each country, including the sponsors of this resolution, have human rights challenges on which there may be diversity of views, interpretations, and solutions depending upon national context and circumstances. Having said that, we have seen media reports related to concerns over burials during the COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate the steps taken by Sri Lankan government to address these concerns, and we encourage Sri Lanka to continue such steps to preserve the pluralistic fabric of the society where people of different faiths have been living in harmony for centuries. Madam President, the estimated PBIs of $2.8 million for the annual implementation of OP6 also raises serious questions about the equitable utilization of regular budget, especially when the OHCHR and the Council are facing serious liquidity crisis. Deployment of 13 posts in OHCHR on Sri Lanka, nearly the size of a branch, can hardly be justified when OHCHR is faced with serious financial crunch. We request this OHCHR for a breakdown of PBIs and share information on how the financial resources would be arranged for this mandate without compromising other mandated activities from the regular budget. Resort to extra budgetary resources or voluntary contributions would undermine the transparency, impartiality, and credibility of the whole process. Madam President, draft resolution also fails to acknowledge the long struggle of the Sri Lankan people and government against LTTE, an internationally recognized terrorist organization. The horrendous terrorist activities by this organization, aided, abetted, and financed externally, had resulted in the loss of innocent lives and depriving the people of Sri Lanka from their basic rights and freedoms. The draft resolution fails to condemn these crimes unequivocally and shies away from a call for accountability of the LTTE and its sponsors and financiers. Unfortunately, the draft resolution appears to rekindle the sufferings rather than healing the wounds of the people of Sri Lanka. Madam President, in view of these reasons, Pakistan delegation would call the resolution to a vote and vote against it. I thank you.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela.
President, Venezuela reiterates its opposition to the selective practice wielded by some countries who are members of this council, who for purely political grounds table initiatives such as this draft resolution L1/Rev1 against the Socialist Democratic Republic of Sri Lanka. Such initiatives do not enjoy the assent of the country concerned, and they violate the principles of respect for sovereignty and non-interference in the domestic affairs of states. We are deeply troubled that the text of the draft resolution seeks to establish the competency of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to collate criminal evidence for future judicial processes, turning it into an organ of a body of criminal inquiry, a flagrant violation of the the OHCHR in the first place. We are also deeply alarmed by the distortion of the preventive approach as a concept, preventive in terms of human rights, that is, a distorted and perverted interpretation of that goal, which is further embedded in this antagonistic initiative against Sri Lanka, which seeks in advance of any concrete findings to disproportionately punish alleged violations of human rights, violations which never took place. It is regrettable that the sponsors of draft resolution L1/Rev1 seem to have ignored the major efforts undertaken by the government of Sri Lanka to comply with its commitments in terms of human rights and to do so since the restoration of peace in 2009. President Venezuela rejects as baseless the interventionist attempts underway into the internal process being experienced by this country towards true national reconciliation. We would like to flag the major risk inherent in biased draft resolutions which follow an interventionist model such as this one. This practice is a throwback to the anachronistic practices and selective proceedings which some major powers and their allies seek to impose, an assault on independence and sovereignty of the countries of the global south, particularly those countries that will not bow the knee to the whims of these global powers. We condemn the selective nature, the politicization and the blatant double standards in these initiatives which establish hostile mandates at the behest of those who seek to uphold murky interests of their own. Some governments of the countries which have promoted these draft resolutions have themselves committed and are still committing serious human rights violations, yet they themselves have never been the subject of similar initiatives. Sri Lanka is cooperating actively with this council and its mechanisms and with the OHCHR, demonstrating major headway made in the promotion and protection of the human rights of its people. This draft resolution is entirely unwarranted, for which reason it should be rejected by the members of the Security Council, and we call upon them all to vote against it. For all of the aforementioned reasons, Venezuela energetically and categorically opposes draft resolution L1/Rev1, and we will vote against. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. The Russian delegation once again reaffirms its position about the fact that it is not acceptable for the Council to consider politicized country resolutions. Experience has shown that these rarely improve the situation of human rights on the ground. On the contrary, they tend to drive the state concerned away from constructive cooperation with international human rights mechanisms. A clear example of this is the draft resolution on promoting reconciliation, accountability and human rights in Sri Lanka. Instead of trying to support the country's delegation and encourage it to engage in dialogue, the sponsors of the draft resolution have preferred to continue using a former practice of making allegations against it. This draft resolution does not reflect balance or objectivity. Therefore, the Russian Federation will vote against this draft resolution, and we call on other states, members of the HRC, to follow suit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. The Human Rights Council should prioritize cooperation and constructive and respectful dialogue. And universal mechanisms such as the UPR should be used as the sole guarantee of ensuring that we fairly and not on a selective basis address human rights issues and concerns. The resolution before us currently does not enjoy the support of Sri Lanka. The government of this country has provided clear and convincing and abundant proof on its position with regard to this resolution, and that should be respected. For that reason, that draft resolution will only further serve the ends of politicization, bias and double standards which have crept into this forum and which should be decried. We agree with the opinion and the concerns that have been flagged by previous speakers about the prevention component contained within this draft resolution. And we're also concerned about the mandate that we are seeking to confer upon the OHCHR if we adopt this resolution, calling upon them or granting them the right to compile evidence as a precursor to future trials. Cuba will continue to uphold the basic principles of cooperation, dialogue and exchange between all countries, and to do so on the basis of the content of the United Nations Charter. President, we reject this draft resolution. It does not refer to issues related to the PBI that will be entailed by its adoption. There's certainly not been enough discussion on the imputed PBIs. For all of these reasons, we will vote against this resolution.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Madam President, India believes in the primary responsibility of the states for the promotion and protection of human rights and constructive international dialogue and cooperation guided by the principles and purposes of the UN Charter in support of such efforts. As an immediate neighbor, India has contributed to the relief, resettlement, rehabilitation, and reconstruction process in Sri Lanka after 2009. Our development assistance has focused on the restoration of livelihoods and economic revival, especially in Sri Lanka's northern and eastern provinces. Madam President, India's approach to the question of human rights in Sri Lanka is guided by two fundamental considerations. One is a support to the Tamils of Sri Lanka for equality, justice, dignity, and peace. The other is in ensuring the unity, stability, and territorial integrity of Sri Lanka. We have always believed that these two goals are mutually supportive, and Sri Lanka's progress is best assured by simultaneously addressing both objectives. India supports the call by the international community for the government of Sri Lanka to fulfill its commitments on the devolution of political authority, including through the early holding of elections for provincial councils, and to ensure that all provincial councils are able to operate effectively in accordance with the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lankan Constitution. At the same time, we believe that the work of OHCHR should be in conformity with the mandate given by the relevant resolutions of the UN General Assembly. We would urge that the government of Sri Lanka carries forward the process of reconciliation, address the aspirations of Tamil community, and continues to engage constructively with the international community to ensure that the fundamental freedoms and human rights of all its citizens are fully protected. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil for a video statement.
Madam President, Brazil thanks the core group for presenting the draft resolution on Sri Lanka. We commend the participation of the Sri Lankan ambassador during the informal consultations as a proof of goodwill, which certainly contributed to a more open and balanced approach during the discussions. We regret that in the end, the Sri Lankan mission decided to dissociate from the process due to different perspectives that could not be accommodated by the core group. In our view, those differences are not irreconcilable, however. While we acknowledge that progress was achieved on the ground in Sri Lanka, we understand that the situation of the country remains of interest to this Council. The Council needs to bear in mind the risk of new episodes of violence and intolerance related to religion or ethnicity. It can support local authorities to foster, to the extent possible, a meaningful and sustained process of promotion of reconciliation, accountability, and human rights in the country. On the other hand, the engagement and cooperation of the concerned country is key to the success of the initiative. While we encourage to operate in good faith, we stress the government's legitimate concerns regarding key issues. Firstly, it did not come unnoticed that some of the recommendations in the office's report presented to the Council might have overstepped the mandate of a body that does not deal with peace and security issues within the UN system. Secondly, evidence relating to violations and abuses of human rights can only result from impartial, transparent, and thorough investigations. Prejudgments and politically motivated accusations must be kept at bay. We also share concerns expressed by some delegations during consultations on the implications of OP6. It requests certain measures to be taken by the office without the establishment of an international accountability mechanism, which would have been the common practice. With the above-mentioned considerations, Brazil will vote in favor of draft resolution 46/L.1 Rev 1 on Sri Lanka. I thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bolivia.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, President. As this is the first time that I am taking the floor, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my government's commitment to ensuring this Council can work towards the proper protection and promotion of human rights. Bolivia rekindled democracy in 2020. The interpreter apologizes, but the sound does not allow for interpretation, and we do not have the statement.
A los derechos humanos, condenados por varios países, instituciones y organizaciones alrededor del mundo. Hoy Bolivia ha dado el ejemplo al mundo de que es posible recuperar la estabilidad de un país sin injerencia de ningún tipo. Sobre el tema en discusión, pongo en conocimiento que Bolivia no ha cambiado de posición sobre los mandatos específicos contra los países, porque violan los principios universales del respeto a la integridad, la soberanía y la no injerencia.
We do not accept that human rights are used as a political tool. Therefore, we will vote against this resolution. At the same time, we reaffirm that it is necessary to fight against impunity and ensure access to justice and effective remedy for the victims.
A reforzar su compromiso con el proceso de reconciliación nacional. Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you. Are there any other requests for explanation of vote before the vote? I see none. At the request of the delegations of China and Pakistan, the Council will now proceed to a recorded vote on draft proposal L1 Rev 1. I ask all members of the Council to log out and log in again to e-delegate to avoid being logged out of the system for security reasons while the vote is taking place. Please note that your vote will appear on the screen after a delay of 4 to 6 seconds. I now ask the Secretariat to activate the vote, and I ask all delegations to register their vote. For the information of all delegations, one delegation is trying to vote and is trying to log in again. I ask for your patience, please. Could all the delegations please ensure that your votes are accurately reflected on the screen? If so, I will ask the Secretariat to close the vote. The voting is now closed. The results of the recorded votes are as follows: 22 in favour, 11 against, 14 abstentions. Draft proposal L1 Rev 1 is therefore adopted. Copies of the results of the votes will shortly be uploaded on the extranet. Yes. We will now take a short technical break for 3 minutes. I ask all delegations please to stay online. Thank you. I hereby close the 47th meeting of the 46th session of the Human Rights Council. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I hereby open the 48th meeting of the 46th session of the Human Rights Council. We will now continue to take action on draft resolutions, and the Council will now consider draft resolution L8 entitled Promotion and Protection of Human Rights in Nicaragua. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia to introduce the draft text by video statement.
President, I am making this statement on behalf of Brazil, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, and my own country, Colombia, the sponsors of draft resolution L46/7 entitled Promotion and Protection of Human Rights in Nicaragua, which was submitted under Agenda Item 2. Almost 3 years have gone by since one of the most serious socio-political and human rights crises in America started. Since then, this Council, through decisions 40 and 43/2, has ascertained firsthand the progressive deterioration of the human rights situation in Nicaragua, a situation which has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and natural disasters. The latest report by the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights, which was presented during this 46th session, gives an account of the human rights violations that continue to be committed in Nicaragua. The report also reflects the silence and the zero cooperation with human rights mechanisms and the non-existent political dialogue by those who, for more than 14 years now, have controlled the Nicaraguan state. 49 delegations are co-sponsoring our effort to contribute to a solution to this difficult situation in Nicaragua. President, this Council has a mandate to and a moral obligation to seek to use all those tools available to it in order to protect and promote human rights. Therefore, the draft resolution calls on the Nicaraguan government to act in good faith and to cooperate with regional and international human rights mechanisms and to accept without delay humanitarian assistance. The draft resolution calls on this Central American state to take steps to ensure the application and exercise of democracy by the people of Nicaragua. We call for an end to the serious human rights violations there and to impunity. President, Member States, ladies and gentlemen, for the reasons I have just mentioned, I invite everyone to adopt by consensus draft resolution